In our ongoing exploration of the life and work of Mies van der Rohe, we delve deeper into the fascinating journey of this iconic architect. Continuing from our previous chapter, we witness Mies's evolution from his groundbreaking days at the Bauhaus to his influential years in America. Join us as we uncover more about his innovative designs, his quest for architectural purity, and his lasting legacy in the world of modern architecture. Mies tried to generalize that idea from the Frankfurt house with the 50x50 house, which aimed to be a prototype for many more, and he found his Medici. Who was a developer named Greenwald, a rabbinic scholar turned real estate developer, who became his main client for the next 15 years. Here we see Mies van der Rohe with Greenwald examining what would become high-rise buildings, mainly residential, throughout the city. You see him sketching one of them, and it was in these sketches that the residential tower was born, which has since colonized half the world. And again, I apologize if I seem excessively attributive, but believe me, it is so. Here, a new way of making architecture was invented, especially in these two buildings. The apartment buildings on Lakeshore Drive, 860 and 880, were where the building with metal mesh and a repeatable, universally homogeneous space was invented. So they're finished now, you might say, but I've seen 50 buildings like this. It's true, but here we highlight it because it was the first time it was conceived and built. With that structure that Mies loved, 3 bays by 5 each, and with something that is very significant. And what he had done was simply to put one Farnsworth house on top of another. This is the interior of Lakeshore Drive. And this is the interior of the Farnsworth house. That space, that box by Mies, Farnsworth simply stacked it to create a new way of living, which were the glass boxes, superimposed and, yes, exquisitely detailed. Here you see it, resting by the window with his ever-present cigars. The second part of that development, and here I apologize to those who are not architects because this is more challenging to grasp, but he modified the 900 promoter and he changed the enclosure of the original ones, which had a problem of modularity in the end because the windows, when reaching the structure, had to be shorter in the end, and he placed them in front so that the windows did not face the exterior face of the structure, but its axis. He also changed from steel to aluminum, and with that, he managed to create something even more homogeneous, which are these towers here. Still, as you can see, the thicker lines of the supporting pillar structure are perceived here, but here nothing is perceived. The curtain wall is a real curtain going in front with better thermal performance. Installations can be accommodated in front and it is completely anonymous. We no longer know if behind there are 3 bays or 300, we just don't know. It's just a curtain hanging in front of the building, and from these, so many others were born. He would later make so many. I've only mentioned some, like the one he did with Gilbert Simmer in Detroit, Lafayette Park, because it's very characteristic. Before, you saw the image of Gilbert Simmer. Well, Gilbert Simmer, along with Mies, managed to build it in this model development also promoted by Greenwald, who unfortunately died in an air crash in 1959. With him, it ended. We leave Mies's career in that territory of residential promotion, but in the meantime, he continued to build on the IT campus. And with something extraordinary to say with this grammar, it's not only useful for making educational buildings, laboratories, or workshops. It also applies to making buildings as modest as a power plant. The same constructive grammar was used for workshops, the power plant, and even for the chapel. This willingness to use a language that could apply to everything was subversive at the time. He also experimented with large spans. Like in the Mensa building, and especially in what he saw as his culmination there, the School of Architecture. He was the dean of the School of Architecture, and he made Crown Hall the most important building with 8 pillars, just like the Farnsworth House but on a larger scale. Here he is posing with the model of the School of Architecture, proud because it was going to be his most monumental and solemn work on the campus, and the most important building of the clear spanker and in America. As you can see, it's modern yet imbued with a subdued monumentality thanks to the large beams that support it. Of course, these beams are necessary to cover the great span from one end to the other because it's a building without a single pillar, just like the Farnsworth House but infinitely larger. And there was Mies, seen here reflecting and puffing on his cigars in the Grand Hall, proposing this titanic project. Once again, a building without a single pillar supported by massive trusses with a depth of 9 meters. 220-meter span for the convention center, which was never built, but with this extraordinary collage. So it became another iconic building of this moment in Mies's life, but impractical. Later, one of his students made the convention hall with a span 5 times smaller and, of course, a much lower cost. There was no need for a 220 span to accommodate a large political convention. Yet he proposed it with this monumental scale indeed of titanic proportions. Beyond Chicago, Mies's career eventually led him to New York, similar to Wright ending up with the Guggenheim. Despite his efforts to be associated with buildings of great spans like Crown Hall, or later the building we'll see in Berlin, today Mies is primarily linked to high-rise office buildings. The first one he constructed was the Seagram building in New York, commissioned through Philip Johnson. In the iconic photo by Irving Penn, we see Mies with the model of the Seagram building and Philip Johnson. Indeed, the Seagram building set the model for office buildings built thereafter, characterized by its bronze curtain wall and exquisite proportions. In the fabric of New York City, the Seagram building stands admirably inserted, leaving space for a plaza with its travertine pavements and ponds. It's a place that, in a way, gives back to the city. At the same time, it recedes and builds this impavid and exquisite prism with bronze carpentry. He would make many others, not to bore you with them, because in the last stage of his life, he became so popular that he created complexes like the Seagram building or the Toronto Dominion in Chicago and elsewhere. But I'm using this one just as an example so you can see what dozens of others were like. Throughout America and Canada, and he even proposed one in London, which ultimately was not built. However, he became what he had dreamed of, a generic architect capable of designing endlessly repeatable projects. Yet, he continued to dream of clear-span structures, of buildings with vast spans, wanting to be remembered for them. He was fortunate enough to end his career with a grand building in Berlin, the Neue National Gallery, commissioned when Germans realized, wait a minute, the greatest German architect hasn't built anything significant in Germany. They rushed to offer him the museum intended to house the great Prussian art collection. Mies was ill, arthritic, and confined to a wheelchair, yet he couldn't refrain from going to Berlin to witness the erection of the great canopy that would be supported by 8 pillars. And so you see in this sequence, you can see how the roof was lifted into place, and in the end, he built what you can visit in Berlin today. In the Culture Forum, in front of the Berlin Philharmonic and controversially facing it, stands the testament of a career, the testament of a life that aimed to be classical while remaining modern at the same time. Mies managed to create monumental buildings without sacrificing the expression of the technical possibilities offered by steel and glass. Inside, as you can see, his ideas about floating planes materialized the interior space of the National Gallery in a way that he couldn't achieve in any other building. And finally, it remains with that grand roof, with coffered ceilings that express the structural logic, like a building that is immensely contemporary yet entirely classical. a final homage to the genius he had always admired, the great neoclassical architect of the 19th century, whose obsession, in Mies's case, was to evoke it with modern techniques. And here we bid farewell to him. We bid farewell to him in his apartment. He never lived in a modern house, always in apartments like this, with its moldings, its cornices, and always alone. Besides Dr. Farnsworth, he had a lover in the last years of his life, Laura March, a divorced sculptor, but they never lived together. They took some vacation trips together, but he always lived alone in his apartment. And there he is, impeccably dressed, with a handkerchief in his pocket, a cigar in hand, surely with 2 martinis in his stomach, seated on a chair that he had designed 40 years earlier. And I have to bid farewell to him. I have to bid farewell to him here. I have to bid farewell to him on the steps of Epidaurus, because in the end, Mies van der Rohe was a great classic. At his death in 1969, many thought that the era of heroes had ended. 6 weeks earlier, Gropius had died. 4 years earlier, Le Corbusier. And 10 years earlier, Wright had passed away. Modern architecture had exhausted itself, and the postmodern reaction led to Mies being erased from curricula, no longer taught, no longer admired. Even though he always said, "Less is more," a famous saying emerged, "Mies is less." It would take the generation of his grandchildren to restore the luster that his children, both professional and spiritual, had caused him to lose. Today, 40 years after his death, we have discovered what a true giant he was, fascinating and enigmatic, taciturn, difficult, often inaccessible, but entirely contemporary because today we know that Mies is more. In this journey through the life and work of Mies van der Rohe, we have explored the depths of modern architecture and the legacy of a true giant. From his early days in Germany to his impact in New York and beyond, Mies has shown us that simplicity can be sublime and modernity can be timeless. Let us always remember that while Mies may have been less for some, for us, his legacy is more. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and always remember that Mies is more. Thank you for embarking on this remarkable journey through the life and work of Mies van der Rohe. From groundbreaking architectural innovations to timeless designs, Mies has left an indelible mark on the world. Let us continue to draw inspiration from his legacy and strive for excellence in all our endeavors. Remember, Mies is more than just a name. He is an enduring symbol of modernity and innovation. Join us as we celebrate the timeless legacy of Mies van der Rohe. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe for more architectural insights and inspiration.